Hi, I'm John Broxton, and on behalf of the International Film Music Critics Association, I'm very pleased to present the 2020 IFMCA Awards for Best Original Score for Television and Film Music Composition of the Year for the main title for Queen's Gambit to Carlos Rafael Rivera. Many congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. What a privilege. Thank you. Thank you. I don't even know what to say other than I can't believe that this has been the kind of year it's been. I can't believe that the reaction has been the way it's been based on a story that I really believe the chess community would embrace, but I never thought it would go past that. So it's kind of been a dream for me this whole year. So thank you so much, and thank you. What a thrill. Thank you very much. Well, I'll go backwards. His approach to music is very hands-on. He's a very musical person, musically interested in all aspects of how that affects the story. It's written, a lot of it, ideas and concepts of music are written in his screenplays as well. So that is just, you know, a gift to get to work with him at all. How it happened was because I was looking for work in 2003 as a guitar teacher. I was had been in a rock band. I'd been signed to Universal Records. And we never got our record released. So it was one of those really sad, I don't know if anybody knows that's going to watch this, about a VH1 Behind the Music. There was a TV show that used to talk behind the music. Right. Well, we're the story that never was because nothing happened. Right. But it was very dramatic, you know, behind the scenes. And so I had gone through this period of I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was building websites, you know, driving gear for other bands that were people that we had gotten to know over the years. And then all of a sudden I had the opportunity to go back to USC to study and get my doctoral degree in composition. And I made a decision to study music. I was gonna make my income through music only. And so I started teaching at the Pasadena Conservatory. I took Suzuki guitar to teach children how to play guitar for, like, you know, the summer, and then I got lucky to get hired there. I was a student at USC getting my doctoral degree and a teaching assistant. And then I also was teaching privately. And so, to get to the Scott Frank part, sorry, but I'm just setting it up, you know. And so I put ads out at Pete's Coffee in, by the way, I'm drinking Pete's here, which is great. And yeah, they won't care. And in Pasadena, where I used to live, and I put ad flyers up there, and in Old Town Music in Pasadena as well. And Scott Frank went into Old Town Music, picked my name out of, he was looking for a guitar teacher. And I got an email from him, and I went to his studio that was in Pasadena. He had like an office because he's like a writer. And I walked in and I saw these posters, and the poster was like Minority Report, Out of Sight, Dead Again, which is one of my favorite movies, you know, and, you know, great composer for that, you know, as well. And how do you call it? And I was just like getting kind of weirded out because I'm about to meet this man and I see this stuff. And I go, you have these really cool posters, what do you do? He goes, oh, I'm a writer, I wrote those. I was like, oh my God, you know, and I went to fan mode. And then I had to curb that. Right. So we just started doing lessons, and I wasn't expecting anything because he was a writer, and I was just I would tell my wife, oh my God, you know, and it was really cool, but I never had any expectation of anything. And I taught him for like 4 years, and then 3 years. It was like 2006, and he goes, I want to make a movie. I'm going to start directing, and he directed a movie called The Lookout. So when he told me that, I was like, it's like, you know, when you have a friend of yours, a really good friend, and they go out on a date, and you're like, okay, tell me what happened. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt about him going to direct a film. Because I was like, I'm a big fan of film, and, you know, since I was very, very young. And I was just thinking, well, I'm going to hear about this process, you know, from the side, because I see him every week for lessons. And I'm going to prepare you to talk to a composer. I'm going to try to give you all the words and tools, because composers get very annoyed at directors not knowing. I didn't know that it's us to have to learn to speak their language, right? But at the time I was like, no, they don't understand it. I'm going to train you, you know. And he's like, you're not training me anything at all. And plus, it's true, I didn't train him at all. We just would talk about it. But then he went and worked with James Newton Howard on this film. And he goes away for like 2 years, basically, to make it. He comes back. And when we come back, he comes back and we start lessons again. He goes, Carlos, you know, we've been doing this for like 5 years now. You know, you never asked me to help you out or hook you up. And I was like, no, because in your world, you know, I'm a guitar teacher. And I hate people who presume or assume things, you know, and say, hey, buddy, you know, I know you know this director, here's my screenplay, give it to him. I've always not liked that kind of thing. And so he just said, well, sometimes you got to ask. And I go, well, okay. I mean, he knew at the time also I'd been mentoring with Randy Newman because of USC. I was getting my doctoral there, and he was on the board, and they had this mentorship program, which was one of the best things that ever happened to me. But again, I wasn't thinking I was going to have a career in this at all. I was thinking I was going to be on the periphery of it, knowing and having a mentor like Randy Newman as I was following my classical career, because that's what I was really trying to do. And know people like Scott Frank and be happy that I know them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's sort of how it started to fall into place. So it was like 2012 or 13, it's almost 10 years after I knew him. And it was because when he said, you know, you haven't asked or whatever, I said, well, I'd love to try to help. And basically what happened was that he said, well, I'm working on a screenplay now. Maybe you can write some music to the screenplay. And I said, oh my God, that would be so cool. So I went home and I started learning Logic and all these other things. And I started writing music that was influenced by this. He was working on a project that went away, and after like a year. So that was like a big letdown for him and myself, of course. But the process had begun then, where I was writing music. He was saying, oh my God, this is really cool. And it felt like the music I was writing was helping him write. So he kind of he started to depend on music. Not like he can write Plenty Fine forever without me ever again. I'm just saying, like, there was a process that felt very mutually inspiring, if you will, or, you know, motivating, if you will. Inspiring is too much, but it would motivate him to write that I would write music. And then I'd be reading one of the great writers, period. Like anything, and the joke I've always made is like I love reading his emails because he's just so good, you know, at understanding structure and putting narrative together, and so I was like nerding out. And so the opportunity, when he mentioned it specifically, he's like, listen, you're probably not going to work on this, but maybe you can write the temporary music, you know, and then you'll get the experience. And I was like, oh my God, that'd be so cool. That went away. And it wasn't until like I moved to Miami, my wife had a job opportunity. Financially it was needed because we had 2 kids at the time, and it was like we were living alone in LA, and scheduling a date was literally like nearly impossible. And it was like this great opportunity for my wife. I had an opportunity to teach at the University of Miami, so it felt like we got to go. We left. 2 years later, I read on IMDb that he was going to direct a movie with Liam Neeson. So I wrote to him an email and I said, I just read this thing. Is this true? And if it is, there's no way I'm not going to be involved. Even if the music gets replaced by a professional, I'm happy to do temp music or whatever you need. And he wrote back. This is me typing, by the way. Sorry. Sorry. And then he basically said, oh, you know, we're gonna, you know, I'll send you the screenplay. You know, I'm not sure, but I'll say, you know, he felt like, you know, I wasn't expecting anything. And then all of a sudden I started writing as soon as I got the screenplay. The same process. I was reacting to that. And he showed it to the producers, and the producers were like, wow, great. I found out later, of course, they're like, wow, and he's cheap, you know? So that was sort of the specifically way, the way in. I like the way you asked the question as chess doesn't seem, instead of saying chess is boring visually, isn't it? Yeah. That's why I was laughing, because it is. Yeah. It was like, it was.
But it's not when your music's with it.
Well, it's not when it's edited the way it's edited.
True.
And with the actors that are acting and shot the way it's shot. That's the thing that's really important. Like I really have come to appreciate the whole of a project versus the part music plays in it. It's an additive, an aggregate, if you will, that evokes the emotion that you have. Had it been shot the way it was, had it not been shot that way, or had it not been cut by Michelle Tesoro the way it was, it would not be maybe as effective, or the music wouldn't have served as well as it did. And so it had a lot of help by the way in which it was put together. And they had their very clear concept of how they were going to light it, shoot it. All the games had their own sort of world. And I had to come into that world not knowing that. You know what I mean? These are conversations that sometimes you just don't communicate. There was no... When things are being made, there's something to be said about the process of it being made versus when the hindsight of it. So in the process, it's almost like survival. Everybody's like, how does this work? How does this cut? How did this, you know, come together? Versus the hindsight of it, you're like, oh yeah, I did think of it this way. But in it, you're not, there's no thinking ahead going, well, you know, my master plan, you know.
Right.
Everybody's figuring it out as they go. So when you come in to bring your element in, you're trying to see if it just fits. You're not thinking bigger picture. Right. And so my bigger picture when I started was I was going to write game music. You know, music for every time we have a game, and there are 20-something games, every time we have a game, there's going to be a kind of music that plays to, you know, to display or showcase her genius or showcase her thinking. And it was almost going to be a visual ballet. Like every time she makes a move, there'll be something, and maybe a palette. And that was a fail. Like the first time I got the first game I got was one between her and Shable when he takes her back in. I remember that was the game. And it was, I thought it was great. Like I was inspired. I saw it, I was like, oh, this looks so beautiful. Oh my God, and I did this whole thing. And I sent it off with pride, you know, like, you know, the ego unfortunately kicked in at that point. I was like, oh, this is really good. And oh my God, this is just going to be, I think we got it. And that guy came back with like, Carlos, you know, I think you're scoring the wrong movie. So that's not only bad to the shin, you know, which is, you know, ego-wise, but it's necessary because I was wrong, and I was wrong on many levels. What was right about the first take was the palette of the piano. The piano, he had asked for piano. He wanted a completely piano-based score. All 7 episodes were supposed to be just piano, but that sort of evolved as the character evolved. So we had to make adjustments, and he's like, oh yeah, you're right. Let's go there. It wasn't, I was discovering this. It wasn't, I was going to have to, if he wanted only piano, it would have been an only piano score, but it sort of evolved. Yeah. But what I realized was that scoring the game in context was much better than scoring the game as a thing that happens. Mm-hmm. So if it's like, you know, if there's redemption going on, the music has to have a tone of redemption. If there's battle going on between her and Benny, that's battle music. And that really, it's like, every time she makes a move, it's the piano. Every time he makes a move, it's like these celli, da-da-da-da. You know, it's like back and forth, and then it just becomes meshed into the game itself. That's much more choreographed. But not every game is choreographed that way. Some games had it, but it really had to do, she's in love with Towns, and she's falling for this character. Then the music has to feel like that feeling when you're a kid and fall in love for the first time. Right. That when it hits you, that, you know, Charlie Brown's girlfriend thing, for anybody who knows what I'm talking about. I don't know if, you know, but it's that feeling, the redhead girl. It's like, oh, you know, and it's like the stars and moons, and that's the feeling. And you want to, so that started getting my cues approved. You know, thinking about
the bigger picture. The
bigger picture where this character was at that moment, as opposed to game music, you know. It was like an accident based on where we were. And it really started because we spent so much time in episode 1 with this piano and her in the basement and the grays and the browns, that I had like piano and cello, maybe just like solo cello. And then every time she would look at the ceiling, there was this orchestral music that Scott was approving. And I was like, okay, so if she's looking at the ceiling, it cannot be her reality. So let's go out of piano into full color. And then we spent months on episode 1, and episode 1 in its original state was 2 hours long. It was like a super long episode that had to be cut. Some cool scenes got cut out, and not for music, but just some of the acting, some of Jolene's scenes. I loved that character in the first episode. Some really cool acting moments that she had. Still, she got nominated, which I'm super grateful about. But anyways, to get to the point is like, when Beth gets adopted into episode 2, she leaves the orphanage, and all of a sudden we're like, you know, it's a color. The color of the palette looks different. She moves to a house, adopted to the new family, and just to drive there felt like we have to add something. Yeah. And I knew that the producer liked flute, like he played flute. So I was like, well, let's add some flute, you know, because hey, I'll get the cue approved. I'm not kidding. Like you always have to think of all these things, you know. And so I started adding some flute color. And then her first day at school, and then that starts the idea of motion. I wanted some more pointillistic kind of music, and And then flute felt like a nice, simple color because it's closer to a sine wave. I know this is really nerdy, but whatever, you know, I mean, it's like I was thinking like the least color possible to start the color palette going. But it wasn't because I thought of this. Initially, I thought the producer likes flute, you know what I mean? It just seemed to land, and there's a lot of these things. So the ending part of your, to finish the question is that it wasn't until that moment that I started thinking, well, maybe, what if we taper down the orchestration and slowly start building it to get to the end. So the reality that she saw on the ceiling becomes the reality she's living in episode 7. But it was all dependent on Scott's approval. So it was never like, you know, I have this concept, you know, and it was always like, well, this could be cool. And as long as I'm sending the cues and Scott's saying yes, we just keep going with it. It's almost like an internal motivator versus, you know, a conversation you have with the director, because they don't really have the time for these kind of conversations. We have the time to talk about it because it's like what turns us on and what, you know, excites us, but you're never certainly speaking that kind of level with them, and not like it's a higher level, it's just time that they don't have to give it, you know, so. It's an interesting thing. The one thing I'll say is that at some point, like a month before we were done, before I'd score that final sequence too, so maybe a month, almost a month to 2 months, Scott started thinking, I'm not sure if I like that main title anymore. I don't think it works anymore. I think you may have to rewrite it. And I said, okay, and I hung up the phone and freaked out. Because we were getting towards it. We were kind of chronologically scoring it, kind of. And then we were getting to the end, and there was so many things that I had is like, well, if because I knew by then we were going to do it, if the main title is going to appear at the ending, then maybe I can kind of build towards it, like give pieces and different instrumentation that keeps building to get better. So by the time we're in the end game, the final game with Borghoff, it does present itself completely fully orchestral, but not with, but not in order. Because it plays out a sequence, but you're seeing an entire segment, an entire chunk. It's like maturity through music, you know, analogous to the storyline. And I was like super excited about it. And then Scott's like, I don't know if I want the main title anymore. And that, and this is the truth, I've learned to go with it because he's right, or she's right, or they're right. Whoever's running the show, you know, as that concept could have been sidetracked and it would have still been the same music because all these cues were approved. It would have just been a different main title. Do you know what I mean? And fine, but somehow, like 2 days later, he goes, well, I kind of like it. And then I took that little email. I'm not kidding. Like I took that little email because I hadn't sent anything yet. Because I was literally freaking out for 2 days. And then so I write back, I go, okay, here's the thing. I'm gonna add more orchestration, more color, because now I've learned the color of the show, blah, blah. He goes, okay, fine. You know? Right. And I just worked on that thing, and added the beginning that wasn't there, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, because that was already getting into, because that was born out of the moment Borghoff realizes he's screwed when she says no. You know, that's born out of that. And it's almost like this Night on Bald Mountain thing. I don't know, you know, I don't know if you know the reference. Yeah, yeah. So it's like, it's sort of that feeling, and it's like, for me, it was like, oh my God, I'm screwed, is the energy I wanted to get for that moment Borghoff, Caesar say no. But what happened was that I ended up tagging that at the beginning, and then really amping up the orchestration. And then he says, well, I think it could work. I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And then the idea was that it stuck to the end. So then, you know, story-wise, it makes sense. To composers, to the audience, they don't care, you know, because the credits. But the motivator, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like it became that, but it was the first thing I wrote. I read the novel on my phone when he told me it was going to happen. So I read the novel and I started thinking, oh my God, it's going to be chamber music because they mention it by Walter Tevis. And then I had to be imitation because of the game play itself, movement, counter movement, counterpoint. Oh crap, it's going to be classical style. I have to write imitation and counterpoint. And so I was excited, and he was excited about the theme for almost a year and a half. Yes, I didn't expect that. I didn't even expect to get hired for Hacks because it's a comedy. And I kept asking I asked the producers towards the end, why'd you hire me? Because if you think about the tone of the show, it has nothing to do with anything like the music of the Queen's Gambit. And it was the fact that they had a show or a story that is funny because they're really good writers as well. They're very good storytellers and they can assemble it well. But it was the emotional stuff that they really were counting on me to do. Yeah. They didn't say this. You know, I was just going, why there's a car chase. I had like 20 versions of a car chase sequence I had to score that wasn't working. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know, maybe comedy, I don't know if, it's just I don't get it. And they had a different approach than Scott on everything. So it was an education for me. But in hindsight now, you know, I realize that the more emotional moments in Hacks work, or the score was stronger there. And they ended up hiring me because they didn't want it to be melodramatic. They just wanted it to be dramatic.
You play the drama, and that makes it lots funnier. It's the old Elmer Bernstein methodology of airplaying. You know, it scores it completely seriously.
Yes.
And that makes everything else funny.
Exactly. Like the schmaltz is like right on the border. You're almost attenuating it. You're like, here, stay, and wherever suck is over there as well. So it's like you're just trying to keep these things at bay and trying to write into what gets approved. But so the dramatic stuff, whenever I'd score that, they were good with that, you know, so.